Welcome to episode number 3 of the Enduring Illness podcast. Today, I get to share another amazing story with each and every one of you. My guest today is Josh Porter, and he is an inspiring athlete that has an impressive list of accomplishments to include qualifying for the Boston Marathon. And he has so many other amazing accomplishments we will discuss in this episode. Then he encountered unexpected illness that has left him unable to pursue his athletic dreams. If this is your first time here, my name is Ryan and I am your host. And I am also an athlete that encountered my own illness when I ended up with post-viral syndrome, also known as long COVID. This podcast serves as a platform for people to tell their stories of enduring illness. This podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then on YouTube, where I feel is the best experience for listeners as I'm able to share photos and video content along with the dialogue. So let me take a little pause here just to give you all a friendly reminder that this video is for information purposes only. Nothing here should be considered professional advice. Always consult your trusted healthcare providers and other professionals for your own professional advice and treatment. Welcome to the podcast. I would like to introduce Josh Porter. He is today's guest. Josh has completed so many amazing endeavors to include multiple triathlons, climbing multiple mountains, and even KOMs on Strava, if you know what that means. That's a pretty big deal. And that all was before encountering the illness that he is currently dealing with. I'm pretty sure he's like some kind of action hero from a movie or something, because if you look at his photos and achievements, that's kind of what he looks like. All over the mountains and doing all this cool stuff. And this podcast is going to be all about him, his story of resilience, recovery, and enduring illness. So Josh, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I will say that I'm extremely excited to talk to you. And, I was able to read through a little bit of your experiences that you had posted and shared with the group and shared with me. So for those of you guys that are out there listening, I would really recommend that you tune in to this episode on YouTube, as I plan to share some of the snapshots and data that he has shared about the changes in his body as he has dealt with long COVID. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it here. So we'll kind of start talking a little bit about your background before you got sick. So can you tell me about your fitness and background before you caught COVID, specifically the infection that led to you having long COVID?
Yeah. So my entire life, I have been really active, really enjoyed the outdoors, but also just training, and never had any sort of health issues, really my entire life, other than, common cold and things like that. So I always thought I was really lucky, actually, because I knew other people had, other issues they had to deal with. But, I just never had any health issues. So I spent a lot of time, outdoors, running, swimming, cycling, and really what drove it for me, I wasn't that focused on the races, although I did do races. I early on, maybe more than 20 years ago or something, I went on a climb of a mountain in Ecuador, Cotopaxi, and one of the guides there was a regular guide for Everest. And so I asked him, I said, hey, what does it take to climb Everest? And he said, or what should I do if I want to do it someday? And he said, oh, you should, really do like races, like marathons and things like that. And that's really when I started. My mom was an active marathoner. I grew up around her, and she was always doing Boston and different things. So I was around it, but I never really thought, that was something I wanted to focus on. But anyway, from that point on, I started running regularly and sort of training and just entering races just sort of to keep me, with a goal and an objective. And then, I was training, just doing different things. And I decided at some point, because I was doing so much training, I was like, I should do an Ironman, And so I picked one that I really wanted to do, which was the France, Nice
Yeah.
Ironman, and started training for it. And this was in 2022. So actually, the funny thing is, this is almost 3 years to the date that I got COVID.
Oh,
I
wow.
think I got COVID May 21st or 22nd of 2022. But so I was training, and I actually did my biggest training session. It was a 90-mile bike ride, and after that I did a 16-mile run. And the bike ride was like I think I did like 6,000 or 7,000 feet of climbing. I mean, it was just a good ride and run, but I was already starting to feel a little bit weak, and I wasn't sure why. And then that was on like a Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday I came down with like cold symptoms, and then Sunday it was a little bit worse, and I tested. I took a COVID test. That was back when it was still people still had them, and we're still sort of thinking about it. So I took a test, and it was like, and I'd taken a bunch before in the past, and it was always negative, or never. But this one, like the moment I took it, like the moment I set it down, there was like a dark black line for positive, and so I thought, I have COVID. And the race was like 4 or 5 weeks away, and so I thought, I'll be back in like 2 or 3 days. Like I didn't think it was going to be a big issue, and I actually called my doctor because I was like, hey, I have this big race coming up. I just got COVID. Should I take, Paxlovid? Because they were taking that. And she was like, no, you're in such good health. Like it just causes rebound, don't worry about, if you take Paxlovid, there's often rebound afterwards. So don't worry about it, but I had really pretty intense symptoms, like, severe, I wouldn't say severe, but an intense cough, had like a mild fever, just really bad sort of upper respiratory symptoms, one of the worst sort of quote colds that I had. And so I was a little worried. I was like, I'm going to lose like a week of training here with this. And, but the other thing is I had one really weird symptom, and it was my head was just burning. And the only way I can describe it, and a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about when I say this, but for me, it's the identical to when I'm swimming and I do like a flip turn, and I accidentally like take in water, in my head, through my nose into my sinus cavity. Like my head will just burn, but that was just constant. And so some people are like, oh, what's your COVID like? I'm like, well, it just seems like a cold, except my head is like burning, and it feels like it's going through my my sinuses or something. And that didn't go away. Like I got over the regular, respiratory symptoms, but like 2 weeks later, my head was still burning. And so I was like, man, is this ever going to go away? And in the meantime, I couldn't train or anything, because of the burning. So anyway, I ended up realizing I'm just not going to be able to do the race.
For the people out there that don't do Ironmans, like it's a big commitment financially, because you got to, especially if you're traveling and doing all that. I mean, it's a lot. So, I mean, it's hard to not just stay focused on, oh, can I do this race? My story is similar to yours. Now, I wasn't traveling, but I was like preparing for Ironman 70.3, and the same thing here. I was just worried about, can I do the race? So I kind of got stuck on that. But I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit and go backwards just a little bit. So I did want to talk about, just like to give everybody an idea of where your fitness level was at, is that I saw that you had said that you qualified for the Boston Marathon. Can you tell me more about your training going up to that level, and kind of explain, like, I'm just going to say, like, high five, because that's hard to do. It's getting harder for people out there that run. It's like they keep cutting the times down, but it's an accomplishment.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is, so I'd run a number of marathons. Actually, this was I qualified in 2000, or the race I ran was at the end of 2018 to qualify for it, which coincidentally put me in the 2020 April Boston Marathon, which they ended up canceling, of course. But really, I'd run several marathons before that, and as I was saying, I wasn't that focused on time. Like I was just kind of, doing it so that I could be ready to do some of these big mountain run climbs and things. But my cousin had also become a pretty active marathoner, and he said, "Hey, let's qualify for Boston," And so he got a program, like a training program, and we just did it. And it was a lot of like, until then I'd just been doing sort of my own training, but this really was specific about, taking long sort of easy runs, and then also, a lot of sort of high intensity stuff. And yes, we went and did the St. George Marathon in Utah, and both qualified for it. It was a tough race, but I had, I can't remember actually how much time I had, but I had a pretty good cushion, for qualifying. And so, I was really excited about it. And I was like, wow, if I actually focus and, do these training programs, maybe, I can continue to improve my marathon times. And so anyway, we were training, we decided to do Boston, but that was, again, putting us in 2020. And so I was heavily training in early 2020, January, February, March. And then, of course, they announced that it wasn't going to happen. And so I was a little bit disappointed, but I was like, that's okay. I'll just do it later when it comes around again. I never thought that would be the last time I ever, get to do it. The funny thing is, after that, in 2021, my cousin and I, we were like, why don't we shoot for a 3-hour marathon, because we were already at like under, like 3:10 or something like that. But anyways, and so we got a coach. We hired a coach to get us down to 3 hours. And I actually, we don't need to go into this, but I developed some issues right after I got that first vaccine, and it was really, I don't know if it was related to it or not, but I suddenly couldn't do high intensity training because I was getting really bad Achilles tendon pain. And so anyway, I pulled back. That's why I started focusing on Ironman, because it was a little bit, longer, slower training. But that's really, my cousin has gone on and run and has done sub 3-hour marathons now, a couple of them, and we're both 50. So it's like, it's a pretty big accomplishment for him. Of course, I haven't run, since I got COVID, but
that's a huge accomplishment. So I don't want to belittle it at all, because that's a huge accomplishment. So many people shoot for that, and it takes a lot of training to get to that point. And I know that you said that races really aren't your focus. It's kind of like a means to an end. It seems like it's just a way that you kind of keep yourself motivated and kind of like working towards that goal. So I did see that you said that you did the Alcatraz triathlon. And I'll tell you that, that's one that comes up in like ads, like whenever you do triathlon and, the algorithm, it gets a hold of you. And that's one of the ads that it would get me. And I'm like, man, I bet that race is like so cool. So tell me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say I didn't focus on races like it was casual. I actually preferred shorter races, and so the shorter ones are the ones I would really sort of focus on times and everything. But yeah, so Alcatraz, I always just wanted to do the swim. I always thought it would just be cool to swim from Alcatraz. We moved here to the Bay Area about 10 years ago, and I was like, I'd hear about people swimming from Alcatraz, and I thought, I want to do that. I looked up the distance; it didn't seem that bad, And so the first time I actually just did a duathlon. It was just a swim run, I think. And I can't remember if it was that one or not, but I ended up doing really well because I focused on shorter races. And so that was just like the swim was like a mile or something. And then the run was a 10K. And I think that was the race I got first in my age group.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pretty good time. So I thought, I want to do the triathlon now. And it's really fun. I will say that even though the swim distance is not that far, it's just a different feeling being out there in like super choppy water in the bay, where, they say there are sharks and things, although I don't think anybody's ever, encountered one. But it was the triathlon was fun because I sort of put it all together, but the swim is really, the exciting sort of part of it.
That's cool that when I saw that you had done that, I was like, I definitely want to ask him about that because that was kind of like one of my bucket list, I guess, triathlons. So that'll lead me kind of to my next question. That is kind of like wrapping up your athletic background. What would you say is your most profound athletic achievement, the one that meant the most to you emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. So, one thing that I did just on a whim, this is a while ago, going back like 2013, I think, so 12 or 13 years ago, was I entered a white collar boxing
Oh, cool.
competition. And so, where you had to try out, and if you made it, then they put you through training for like 4 months, and then it was this charity event where you fought somebody, and so I did that. When I was little, I had done a little bit of like uh, boxing or karate, like little things, and so I thought it'd be fun. But I somehow made it through the tryouts, and then I was paired up with somebody to fight. And I thought for sure. So I was up there in front of everybody, and I was super nervous and everything. And then of course it didn't go nearly like I'd planned or thought it would. As soon as you're out there, like you sort of just lose control. But I thought for sure I had lost. I was sure. It was a 3 round
Hmm.
fights, just similar to like an Olympic boxing, and I was sure that I had lost. I just got hit so much, and the guy was a really good athlete. And but anyway, they raised my hand, and I was in total shock, that I won, and it was split decision. But that was probably the most sort of excited I've been after some event. I don't know if that's necessarily my greatest achievement, but it was just a really fun event. Some of the training sessions I've done, or maybe more,
Hmm.
or just some of the runs and things, like some trail runs, not races, but just, like a group of us ran up Mount Whitney here in California once. I just thought that would be a really hard, um, trail run, and we were sort of up and back, by like 4 p.m. or something like that.
Sometimes the most impactful things, though, are things outside your comfort zone. So it sounds like the boxing thing was a little bit kind of something outside of your normal thing. So, that's still pretty cool. I mean, like I said, and, a lot of the pictures that you had shared of like the mountains and climbing all the mountains and doing all that stuff were super cool. So it looks like you've accomplished a lot, especially before you got the COVID infection, which you said earlier was about 3 years ago. So kind of leads me into talking a little bit more about when you got COVID and kind of like the things that led you to realize that you had, lasting symptoms from it. So I saw that you had shared some of your heart rate data that led you to realize that something was wrong. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So as I was saying, we had this. Well, I was planning to go to France to do this race, and so we already had the travel plans, and so we decided to go anyway. I was actually really worried about the flight because my head was just still burning and wasn't sure how it would do. I took a whole bunch of like medication, Sudafed, and everything for the flight, just to sort of put me out. The flight ended up being fine. We decided not to go to Nice because I thought I'd just be too depressed down there,
Yeah.
and so we actually went to places like Normandy and some places, where you cannot feel sorry for yourself, really,
Yeah.
and but on that trip, I decided I hadn't run actually for like 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks since I got COVID because I couldn't get over this burning in my head, and finally it sort of went away. It would like come and go, and so I decided to go for a run, really easy, like, 10 or 11 minute pace sort of
Yeah.
run. And my heart rate was really high. It was like, I think it was like 160 or something, which is way higher than it would ever be for that pace. And I actually was thinking that my heart rate monitor, my watch was malfunctioning. Like I was sure something was wrong. I was like, that can't be right. Because every once in a while it's not, messes up or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But I stopped and I sort of just walked back. It was like, so I'd only gone like a mile and a half or something. And then the next day I went for another run and the exact same thing. My heart rate was super
Mhm.
high and my my garment, and so that's when I knew something like lasting, something had changed, like
Yeah.
because there was just no way in a few weeks that my conditioning would deteriorate to that point. And that was the first sign. But the other, as I was saying, was I just continued to have on and off, like my head burning. Like I would just turn, lift a piece of luggage, like bend over anything, and it would all come back. And then it would last for like a few days. And so I remember on that trip, I just couldn't wait to get back to California to go to the doctor and see what was wrong. Like I was sure I would go, they would like, you know, do an MRI or something and see some issue, and it would be very clear. But I got back and can't remember when, maybe it was July, around July, they scheduled some different things like heart scans and even a brain MRI. And they were like, "Oh, you're fine. Nothing, we don't see anything." And I was like, "No, something's wrong." It was really about that point where I started developing like really bad fatigue as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really like the word fatigue because it's not even like a fatigue. It's just like I just feel super weak, like I can't get out of bed. Like my head is really heavy, things like that. And that, and really those three symptoms, crazy heart rate, the burning head, and the fatigue have continued, almost for 3 years. It's gotten a little bit better, I will say, probably the last year or so, but I still have it. Like I feel it every day.
Yeah. I think that's, you kind of talked a little bit about something that I've noticed is that and you can tell me if you experience this or not, but when you're going through that stage of knowing that something's wrong and you get this test done, you're like, well, I'm worried they're going to find something. But then when they don't, it's almost just as disappointing because you're like, well, there's nothing that's like clear on a test that says there's something wrong with me. Nothing that like a medical professional can really point to and say, oh, we need to address this. And it's just hard. It's hard mentally. It's hard emotionally.
Yeah, no, it really was. Because I was sure they would see something somewhere because it was so different. For me, it was like almost 180-degree change. Like something clearly had shifted, and so I was really frustrated actually when they didn't see anything. And then I did see like other doctors, like they were like, well, maybe you have a sinus issue because of that burning. So I saw an ENT, specialist, and he was like, oh, maybe you just change the way you position your head when you're sleeping, and that's causing it. And I was like, no, I'm 48 years old. I didn't like suddenly change how I sleep,
Yeah.
like, so it was it was really frustrating. It has been frustrating. I remember then I was like, I got to go see like some long COVID specialist. I didn't even know about long COVID at that point. Like I just hadn't followed, I think it was already an issue, but I hadn't really followed it and knew anything about it. So I was like, can I see, there's got to be like a COVID specialist or something. And my doctor's like, yeah, we have a clinic for that or a doctor for that. You can schedule it. And the first availability was like in December, and this was like July or something. And I was
wow.
And I was like, why is it so far out? And that's when I realized like they're not taking it seriously. Like it's not, or either that, or they're either not taking it seriously, or they knew or know that there's nothing they can do, and so they're just scheduling them out when they can. So I think I didn't actually see that doctor until October or something. And of course there isn't really much they can do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that kind of brings to light a little bit of something that I think that can be frustrating. And that is the fact that like, I assume that you want to get back to somewhat of a percentage of your old lifestyle. And I feel like at least the doctors that I have seen personally, like if you're like able to go to work and do that kind of stuff and maybe do a light weightlifting workout, I don't really feel like the doctors really, for the most part, care about getting me back to running like, 4 miles a day or whatever it may be. Like, I just don't feel like they think that's really important, although it's important to me, So I think that kind of makes it difficult.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I will say I found some good, doctors, mainly sort of research oriented, you know, clinics and things, who are focused more on trying to find out what the issue is. But the more traditional, providers, it's really like if you're, because I am able to work, I'm able to, I can't try. For the first year, I kept trying to get back into training. I just kept trying. I was like, maybe I can just train through it. And every time I'd get really bad burning, bad fatigue. I just couldn't, I couldn't do it because I would be down for like a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to a point where I can do like weights,
Mhm.
not for a long period of time. I try and keep it to like 20 minutes really, and then it's just on and off, like I rest, let my heart rate come back down, and then I do a little more. But my doctor is like, that's, your life is normal. So, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
And this is just me like saying this, like you still present healthy. Like you look healthy. Like you don't look like you're overweight or anything. And especially if all your blood markers are coming back okay, like on your blood panel and all that stuff, it's like, I think it's really hard for them to do and to like really go anywhere with it. But like you said, you're still operating. But I did want to kind of expand on that. I know that you said that you're still able to work, but like, how had long COVID impacted your personal life or work life? And that's coming from when you had the acute infection to now. So if that's changed at all.
yeah, so I mean, it affected me a couple of different ways. One was it did actually affect my work, because I had my job, required or requires quite a bit of travel, overseas travel. And when I would do that, the jet lag was just a lot worse.
Mhm.
And so I actually told, the group I work with, I said, I just can't travel, like I was doing. And so they were really accommodating. And for a long time, I didn't really travel. They also, because I work a lot of overseas with a lot of overseas groups, they were saying, well, you can try and not do late calls and things like
Mhm.
that. So I had to block my calendar so that I didn't have late calls and all these things, because it was just so hard on me. And that really went on for like 2 years or so, and they were really, sort of worked with me on that. But the other way it affected me was because my identity sort of had gotten so tied up in doing all these, outdoor sort of, uh, adventures, I guess, best way to put it. Like, that it was really hard because I had, it become my life, and I had planned so many things from that point. And even now, like, I was telling you, it's 3 years ago. Like, I just almost hate thinking about it because I just can't believe it's been 3 years that I haven't really done, what I thought I would be doing this point in my life. I've had to focus on other things and pick up other hobbies and just, try and, not to think about it. There's actually a mountain, or it's not a mountain compared to, like, the big mountains, but there's a Mount Diablo outside our house here, and I used to ride up it all the time on my bike. It's like a pretty good, uh, ride. And for the longest time, I hated walking outside and seeing it because
Mm.
I knew I just couldn't do it. Now I have a electric bike and I can go up there, but it took a long time to sort of come to terms with, maybe this is how it's going to be,
Yeah.
for a long time. I'm still hopeful that something will, some discovery or something, will happen, but I also just had to I had to accept that this is a change for me.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, though, is I think accepting where you're at now, that's not saying that things might not get better,
Right.
but accepting that this is where I'm at now is like key to dealing with it, because a lot of the mentality that served us well as athletes of just hammering through things like doesn't work whenever you're dealing with this. And it's kind of the way that you're programmed most of the time. It's just a completely different beast to deal with. You had talked a little bit about the community aspect, which I just find is huge for athletes, because we do build our lives around these communities, and it's like they joke that the running clubs are the new dating scene and all this stuff. And I was in like a run club, and had a bunch of close friends, and we would go like every Thursday night and do run club, and like a lot of times on Saturday mornings, and especially as we'd get ready for races and stuff, and that becomes your friend group. And I know in my case, I just kind of had to tell them, like, guys, like, I gotta stop. Like, I can't put myself in that spot to feel bad for a week just because I want to go run. So it's extremely hard mentally, emotionally, for your community and everything. So I know that you had said that you're able to train some with weightlifting. If you had to put a percentage on how much you've recovered, what do you think that would be?
I'm really far from full recovery. The Because I still feel it every day. Like, it's funny. I get on a Peloton for like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I did like a 3 hour session, a couple of months before on the Peloton, before, like, an intense 3 hour session. I right now, I can do 5 minutes, and that's a light 5 minutes, because my heart rate just goes so high. And then
Yeah.
if I push it too hard, my head will start, burning, and then I get these bad, sort of persistent headaches. So on one sense, I'm really far from recovery in
Mm-hmm.
that, in terms of being able to do that. But I am, I don't, that's a good question. I mean, I would say, if you include that sort of ability to do the things I was doing before, I'm still really far from that. Maybe it's only like 20 or 30% recovered.
Yeah.
But I have gotten better, because, like, I remember 6 months after I got long COVID, I was just throwing a baseball with my nephews, I guess. And, like, I remember after like 15 throws or something, suddenly I was like, I got bad, weakness and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like down for like a week and a half just from playing, catch.
Yeah.
But then the other day I was playing catch again with uh, my cousin's kids, I guess. And I was amazed. I was like, oh, I'm playing catch and I'm not. But I still, it's just a matter of how much I push it. I push it,
Mm-hmm.
I can trigger all those symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I always hope it doesn't happen, and then suddenly it comes. But
Yeah, it's just it's hard to deal with, and I think it's hard to put a percentage on it. I asked that question just I kind of like people to think about it, because when I've talked to other people about recovery, the vast majority of people, recovery would just be able, I'll make it through the day, make it through the work day, but like I miss my routine of being able to get done with dinner and go on a jog and come back and not feel wiped out. And you really can, you know, start yourself into that just drop off of just feeling horrible. And I've done it to myself, where kind of similar to you, is just like I'd had like a busy Saturday, and we had kind of done a bunch of stuff with my family and my kids, and then it was Easter weekend, and then Easter morning we did our church thing, and then we went to a lunch with the family. And I told my wife, I was like, I need to go home and lay down. Like, and I'm like, I, the old me, and that, I would have woken up on Easter morning and ran 5 or 6 miles, come home, showered, and done all that stuff. And, and my wife, fortunately has seen that and understands like what I used to be able to do. But I was like, I need to go home and just lay down. It's like that Easter egg hunt that just really laid me out, and it's kind of comical. I try to laugh about it, because if I don't, sometimes you'll cry about it if you don't laugh about it.
yeah, I know it is. That's uh, that's how I feel too. Is I just had to put my focus on other things, and that's why I'm doing things like this. I think
Yeah.
is helpful. It's productive. I've tried to volunteer for like research and other trials and things, just to be helpful that way. And then it puts you in a community of people who are doing the same sort of thing. Because it is, I think, mentally, it's easy to go to a dark place, and you can't do any of the things that you once did. I mean,
Yeah, I feel fortunate because I feel like I had two different communities. I had like my running athletic community, and then I actually had like a good like church community. So
Mhm.
I don't feel like I lost all of my community because I still had like some church friends that I did stuff with and stayed engaged with, and they were very separate. So I don't feel like I lost everything. And if I feel like if my life had been completely in that, it would have been much harder. I also know somebody who dealt with long COVID from the original, 2020 stuff, and actually he's recovered, but not like he still has like migraines and stuff that he deals with, but he's like back to training and stuff.
All
So
right.
I kind of knew somebody that had dealt with it, and I feel like that helps. But having this community, and we met through that Facebook page, and just getting on there just helps because I feel like other long COVID groups don't really understand the endurance athlete aspect of it, of knowing what you could do before and
Right.
how much we pushed ourselves. And, the other part of that, which I think, you've kind of seen, is just like the data from like how we track our health metrics and seeing the really huge change between before the infection and then after. And it just like, it's good to have some kind of community.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. It's funny because I had similar to you. I had to, or maybe it's not the same exactly, but I told like because guys would keep asking me like months out, like 6, 9 months, like, hey, what's the next race? What are we gonna do? Or you want to do this one? And I'm like you don't understand. Like I can't do anything, and like I can't. Not only that, I don't. I almost don't want to hear about it, because
Yeah.
it's. So I like unfollowed like all the. I used to follow Iron Man, all these different things. I had to unfollow it all because it would just keep popping up in my, Instagram or whatever, and yeah, and just focus on other things. I also have had some progress, I think, on the medical side, um, just because I've well, I don't know if it's progress necessarily, but I did do some other like more advanced scans and things. And they did see some abnormalities, with the MRIs, and then the latest was they saw that I had like elevated or active, Epstein-Barr virus, which I guess
Okay.
is common for people with long COVID, and they're not really sure whether that's a cause or just
Yeah.
correlated. But I feel like people are looking at other things now, and so
Yeah.
I agree. You have to have hope, like that something will improve in the future. That's like one of
Yeah.
the critical things.
And I think that's something also, like whenever I started doing this, I wanted to do it from a place of letting people kind of tell their stories. And I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of these long COVID like people on YouTube and stuff, it's like they're trying to sell you some brain retraining program or this or that. And it just feels so fake. And I'm like, I just want to give a space for people to tell like what their experience has been. And it's not like, and just because something has worked for you to maybe get somewhat better doesn't mean it's going to work for me. But like it just gets frustrating when you try to watch stuff to, kind of think through things. And that's all you get is like, oh, buy my, you know, membership program this. And I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I just want to give people like a clean place where you can kind of talk about just how hard this is and like how we're working through it together and still like maintain somewhat of hope. And so if has there been anything that's helped you recover just based on your personal experience, any changes you've made or things that you try to watch?
Yeah, well, and just going back to your point about that I look okay. There was as like when you're training, you're taking in a whole bunch of calories. Like I used to just I was specific about what I ate, but I also was taking in a whole bunch of calories.
Yeah.
And so after when I suddenly couldn't train anymore. that's one thing that I had to adjust because I started gaining weight. I just started gaining weight, and I realized I was like, wait a second, now I'm going to be even more depressed, And so I have been deliberate about like focusing on diet, and
Yeah.
trying and improving it. And, one, just making sure I'm not taking in too many calories for the amount of, physical activity that I'm limited to. But others, just trying to be healthier and things like that. I've tried a whole bunch of different things. I'm not sure what's really helped. I did, a lot of those doctors and things that are selling different things. I've tried all those online,
Yeah.
whatever. I've done all different kinds of supplements. I've tried different antivirals. I bought a hyperbaric
Hmm.
chamber. I did the nicotine patch. I've
Yeah.
taken creatine. I've tried a bunch of different things. I'm really not sure what has helped.
Yeah.
Um, because I have tried so many different things, and so it might just be time. Honestly, it
Yeah.
could it could be
I
time.
don't know. I've heard so many, and I'm sure it's like at having this for 3 years, I'm sure that you've heard and seen everything. And I'm sure that gets a little bit frustrating. I've seen, people's anecdotal experience where they get sick with something and then they get better. There's just a multitude of things that we just don't understand as a society about what causes this, what can fix it. And I think the biggest thing I try to hang on to is just gratitude, hanging on to gratitude each day. That whenever I was really sick, I mean, I struggled to make it through the workday. I would really struggle to focus. Like, I would get really mentally tired and I would need naps and stuff just to make it through the workday. And fortunately, with my career and stuff, I'm able to work from home. And so it really assisted me in being able to maintain my employment and all that. But it's, that's probably the biggest lesson that it's taught me, is just kind of maintaining gratitude. So what would you say that this experience, like the biggest lesson it's taught you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've learned a lot of things, and I think for the better for me. So I was, prior to this, I was probably not very sensitive to, um, just being specific, I guess, just chronic health conditions, and
Hmm.
part of that, I don't think is my fault necessarily. It's just society in general, like the you medical profession, doctors, there's just not a huge focus on, chronic health issues. And that's why, a lot of people with different autoimmune illnesses and others sort of, are frustrated. I didn't understand any of that before, and so it's given me an appreciation for other people who are in not necessarily just COVID related, chronic health issues, but other things as well. It seems like I've learned that, maybe viral infections are the main trigger, but there are a lot of different. There could be other triggers as well, and people end up just having long term issues from those.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't very sensitive to it before, so I've become much more sensitive and sort of an advocate for,
Yeah.
people who are in that position. But yeah, gratitude has been by far, I think, the biggest thing that I've learned. I have to appreciate. I have been really lucky. I was super lucky before. I think, life kind of just worked out, um, and I feel a little bit like, it's not fair that it's me, because so many people, everybody I know got COVID, and I'm the only one who really ended up with these issues. I know a few people now who have, around me, who have similar issues, but there's so many other things just to be thankful for. That's what I've focused. One of the things I've really focused on since I've dealt with this. Because, like I said, if you get too focused on sort of yourself and what your life used to be, I mean, you can quickly go to a dark place,
Yeah.
And I remember a few times waking up, because I used to wake up all the time. I used to have So again, I never had any issues before, and then I got this, and I started having really bad heart palpitations at night. Like, I'd wake up
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 times every night. My heart would be pounding, and And so I wake me up and I'd be lying there, and and suddenly it's like, get really depressed. Like, this is my life,
Yeah.
Fortunately, that has sort of gone away. I don't know if I just gotten used to it, or I just sleep through it now. But I also have just, come to appreciate all the other, things that I'm able to do, my family, kid, just a lot of, I'm, blessed and lucky in a lot of different ways. And you realize everybody has their, their thing they have to bear
Yeah.
in this life. And so life isn't fair for anybody, and so you just gotta to sort of remember that, and then focus on what you have control of, and not
That's
worry about
right.
things that you don't.
It's made me be a lot more intentional with my time. Especially being a parent. There were a lot of times whenever I would, you know, come down here, and I mean, this is like my home gym down here. So I got my bike back here with my Wahoo, and I got my kicker on it, so I could like train down here and treadmill and all that stuff, and tried to be really intentional with spending time with my kids
Mm-hmm.
and taking this as a little bit of a break and saying like I'm going to focus on some other things. I kind of thought about starting a garden outside, and my wife says I'm turning Amish all of a sudden or something, but you'd kind of said about like starting new hobbies and like focusing on other things, and I think that's like a good thing to kind of shift. And that was our life for a long time, but it doesn't mean that it can't still be good in a different way. And I still try to maintain hope that something will happen and I'll be able to get back to some a semblance of that. I'm not saying I'm ever gonna run a full Ironman or something like that again, but at least to get back to something like that. So that's like at least one of my goals. So what would maybe like one of your goals going in the future, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I do think, like I was saying, that I learned at some point that you really have to continue to have hope. That things will change, that they'll find some way to cure or treatment, or something. And so that's, I think, partly my goal as well, is to try and so I try and allocate a certain amount of time, to this sort of effort, to research, and just things like this, or participating in other things. And hopefully through that, we come not only with some sort of cure or treatment for this, but I think for other, just chronic health and autoimmune conditions as well. It's there was there I remember early on, maybe like 2 years into it or something, there was a trial for long-term dosage, or higher dosage, longer-term use of Paxlovid. The
Hmm.
idea being that maybe you could use an antiviral to suppress sort of viral persistence of the COVID virus. And I was debating. I'd been picked to participate in it, and I was debating whether to do it or not, because I was thinking I can just get somebody to prescribe this dosage for me, and I can,
Hmm.
try it without being part of the trial. And one, I'll know I'll get it, because in the trial you might get a placebo, and
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
but I was talking to somebody else who is a pretty accomplished cyclist, who was dealing with the same thing, and he was like, you should do it, for the good of the effort,
Yeah.
participate in it. And you may not get the drug, you might get the placebo, but that'll help. That data will help, And
Yeah.
so I did. And that's the way I've been trying to think about it since then, is what can I do for, not just for myself, but for others. Now I did end up getting the drug, and it didn't help, and I think
Yeah.
they realized that that's not, any kind of cure or treatment. But so things like that, I've tried to take that mentality going forward, and hopefully
Yeah.
that leads to some sort of cure. I do still hope to be able to climb certain mountains and things at
Yeah.
some point in the future, but I also realize life, I'm not getting younger,
Yeah.
and at some point it's just going to be, it's just not going to be possible. I'm kind of sad. I was really excited to target a 3 hour marathon,
Yeah.
and I know that's probably not, that's basically out of the cards, regardless, even if I recover fully. But so I don't know. I haven't really set specific goals going forward, other than I'm still hopeful that there'll be,
Yeah.
a recovery, and somehow I'll have contributed to that.
Yeah, I would say that I kind of was with you there on not having a lot of understanding and empathy for people that deal with these, chronic illnesses, and not really understanding it. Some of that just comes from, I was in the military, and it's like the mentality of, suck it up and rub some dirt on it. That kind of mentality, like, it's just so prevalent in that society. And, dealing with it's been very humbling. I'll tell you that much. And, I can only imagine how alone and isolated that people that dealt with these kind of conditions before long COVID, because long COVID's kind of been wrapped into it. And even if you look at things like Lyme disease and all the funky things that happen to people after getting Lyme disease, like not being able to eat red meat and just all the weird things that your body can do whenever it impacts these viruses, diseases. And it's just really interesting. So it's taught me a big lesson in just empathy and just trying to understand what people are going through. And I truly hope that you are right, that with the growing population of people that are dealing with this, that it's bringing some more focus to it, so that we can come up with some good treatment plans and solutions to these conditions. So that's all I've got for today. So I just want to thank you. And do you have anything else that you want to share with anybody before we get off here today?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really, but yeah, that is my, I think, as I was saying, that's what I've also really learned. And in some way, like my wife jokes that she's glad it's me and not, her, because I was one of the, like you said, it's like, just push through it, and part of that was, I remember when I was little, my mom, who grew up on a farm, she would always tell us, like, if you think you're sick, you're going to be sick, if so don't, and that's just the way I was. So I agree. Like, I've developed this empathy for people around me, and for me, it's just so clear that this was, because I did not. I was almost 48. I had not had any health issues. I barely had
Yeah.
like even like occasional allergies. Like everybody around me would always get allergies, and suddenly I got COVID, and it like totally changed my life.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing that I would leave with people, is that it's real. There's this is out there, and people are dealing with it, and to just be sort of sensitive to that. Not only this, I guess, but all sort of other types of chronic conditions, not autoimmune
Yeah,
illnesses.
that's great, because like there's a lot of people out there that don't understand when you say I'm too tired to do this, or I don't have the energy or capacity to do this. A lot of people really truly don't understand. So I really appreciate your time today, Josh, and this has been just a wonderful chat with you. And thank you so much for everything that you've done to help advocate for people and just share your story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise, Ryan. I appreciate you doing this as well. Thank you for having me on.
I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Enduring Illness, and I hope that you found the information shared with our special guest today extremely impactful. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, and don't forget to check out one of our other episodes where we discuss enduring illness.